Hello there, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. James here. Now, if you've clicked on this video, you are an SBR student and you need some top tips ahead of your examination. You're in the right place because I have the SBR guru with me today. Tom, welcome to my little video today to walk and talk through some top tips. Say hello to everyone who's tuning in.
Hello everybody, and hello James, and thank you for inviting me to your channel today.
Absolute pleasure, Tom. The pleasure is all mine. Now, for the viewers out there, just give us a little overview of your experience of SBR and your experience with ACCA.
Okay, well, first of all, I am an ACCA member like yourself, so I remember doing these exams. I am that old that when I did the exams, there was no YouTube. In fact, there weren't even international financial reporting standards. So during my career, I have been a lifelong learner because I am now teaching stuff that actually when I was a student just wasn't there. I've been teaching for 25 years now. I started out with Kaplan, and now I'm an independent lecturer. I have my own SBR courses, and I also help our professional body with some stuff in the background. So you might see me on student webinars with ACCA or articles with ACCA, and I do some train-the-trainer stuff as well with them. So yeah, SBR is my life.
Oh, spot on. I mean, that is what the viewers want to hear. I mean, gosh, they've got their pen and paper at the ready, all set to go. But what I've done for you guys is I've put all of Tom's details and his podcast in the description below. So go and click it, drop him a message anytime. But for now, get comfy, make sure you watch all the way to the end because we're going to be talking SBR, some top tips to help you pass your upcoming examination. So Tom, kick us off. What is the first thing for the students to get written down to help them pass?
Well, here we are at the end of February, and if you're watching this live and we've got an exam coming up in a couple of weeks, if you're doing the exam remotely, if you're doing a CBE exam remotely, it is really important that you run those tests. It's really important that you look at the fantastic resources that ACCA have put on, because it would be a tragedy if all that work that you put in somehow ended up being spoiled on the day because of a procedure that you could have anticipated. So that's kind of an immediate thing to say.
Yeah, I agree. These are things that you can control. So getting your actual environment set up, getting used to the platform as well. It's all on ACCA's website. So ping it in or go on to SBR ACCA and it's all on there for you. What else are you going to go for?
There's a simple thing about having an Ethernet cable so that you're hardwired on the internet. Now, if you're watching this at any time, yeah, James has just referred there to the ACCA practice platform. There are so many resources on the ACCA Global website, whether they are articles, whether they are recordings of webinars, whether they are examiners' reports, whether they're past exam questions. There is a wealth of resources out there for those of you who are starting out, for those of you who are revising, and for those of you who've got an exam next week.
Lovely stuff. And for a small plug, obviously I've done a small introductory video on that. So go and check it out after this, because we've got to go more into SBR now. We've got to sap this knowledge out of Tom that's going to help you pass out there. So Tom, kick us off. What are the first key areas of SBR to help a student pass?
Okay, well, if you're looking at SBR from the beginning, it is a broad syllabus, and the exam itself has no choice within it, like all strategic professional exams, like all ACCA exams, and that means you do have to cover the syllabus. So studying properly, having a good breadth of knowledge is really key, because when I look at SBR exam questions, they are very rarely in silos. They are very rarely just testing one thing. It's testing a range of matters. So having that breadth of knowledge, I think, is key.
And what about students who are going to try and question spot as well?
Okay, back in the day, this was fun. Back in the day, you know, under a previous exam structure, under P2, where you had a 25-mark question that was based on sometimes one current issue, it would be fun. Oh, we got a new standard on impairment coming out. There's clearly going to be a 25-mark question on impairment. Let's know everything about impairment. But that's not the case with SBR. Current issues are still there, you know. So things like, you know, how you would account for the consequences of accounting for COVID. As I record this in February 2021, there has been no reference in any SBR exam to date about the accounting implications of COVID. And yet, bizarrely, because the ACCA are future-proofing our qualification, when you look at the syllabus, it's there, you know, the idea of a catastrophic pandemic is actually in the syllabus. What would be the consequences of that?
Exactly.
So we're always going to get surprises in the exam.
Now, for when I passed the P2 exam, I mean, we're talking a few years ago now, but it's all still relevant. I thought that one of the reasons why I passed it was I saw some of my friends at college who learned the textbook, and unfortunately they didn't get the right result. I was more past paper focused, actually applying the knowledge. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's two things. There's two phases to studying SBR. And the first phase is to soak in the information. The first phase is the tuition phase. And what's key there is that you understand the principles. And a little bit of that is rote learning, just a little bit of that. But it's much more important that you understand the issues, because when you start the revision phase, which is when you start doing exam questions, the information that you've stored in your head has to come out. And it has to come out in a way which is answering the question that is set. And the questions are always different. So it's not about in the exam remembering information that you then write down. If you're in the exam and you find yourself writing more than one sentence, which is a lift from your notes or from a lift that stuff you remember, pause, check yourself, because you've got to read the requirement, you've got to read the case study, you've got to take the information from the question, put it in your answer, mix it up with your knowledge, and come out with the judgment and the advice. Ethics. Can I talk about ethics?
Fire away, Tom. The guys are writing away furiously on this, but go on. All yours, all yours.
So, ethics is a classic example. In the tuition phase, you do need to know and study the 5 pillars. Yeah, OPIC, OPPIC, yeah, objectivity, professional competence, yeah, professional behavior, integrity, confidentiality. You've got to know those 5. And for many people coming to SBR, they know them already, and that's fine, but they need to know them again. But when it comes to the exam, you are never, ever going to be asked, what are the 5 pillars? You are never going to be asked, should there be a 6th one, critically appraise them. You know, you're going to be given a situation where somebody's done something wrong, and accounting treatment has been misstated, profit has been manipulated. And then you've got to reflect, take your toolkit, you understand your ethical principles, take your toolkit and apply it to the question. And that's why, James, you were a good student, because you were taking, not that I taught you or anything like that, but you passed. And why did you pass? Because you did exam questions. And I hope that you then also reflected on what you did well and what you could have done better having done that question, but you had that experience.
I think the key overview there is application to the scenario from the knowledge. I think just nicely summarized on that, hitting the nail on the head. If you haven't got that down, you're going to go into that exam at a disadvantage. But also, we touched on past papers there. What do you say to some students who are going to do the SBR exam and haven't done any past papers?
Gareth Bale recently signed again for Tottenham. Hadn't played in a proper football match for several months. What did Mourinho do with him? He put him on the subs bench. It took, he played him in reserve games. He played him in, the Europa League games before he was bringing him into the Premiership. It's not been a fantastic time for Bale, but the point is that you need match practice. Before you do the thing that matters, you needed to do a full 3-hour timed exam. So as you build up, you know, in tuition, you can do small questions.
Yeah.
As you build up, you do whole questions. And as you get nearer and nearer the exam, mock examinations.
The more the better.
The more the better. So
Yes.
that prepares you, yeah.
Spot on. And also, I'm going to think about now, before we get to SBR, so the sort of foundation, the fundamental papers, the applied papers beforehand, what are the ones there that you need to be really focusing your knowledge on that are really core for SBR?
Okay, so if I think about a typical cohort of SBR students, there will be some who will have done FR at the skills level. And that is from an ACCA perspective, the sort of base on which we're then building. And there's a lovely overlap between FR and SBR. So impairment comes up at skills, revisions come up, group accounts come up, cash flows come up, and they appear again at the higher level.
Right.
Now, when I say that to people, there's another part of that cohort which did a degree, which did some, you know, dodgy degree somewhere, and oh no, I didn't say that, which did a degree and gave them exemptions from the skills level. So they've got graduate skills, they've got research skills, essay skills, and some of those students feel sometimes a little bit insecure that they haven't necessarily got the full breadth and depth that skills students have done. But you know what? I end up also reassuring the skills students because they passed their FR 2 years ago, or they passed FR with 55%. So actually there's 45% that they're not comfortable with. So I think when I'm teaching SBR, one of the things that I like to do is to keep it simple, keep it principles based, and build it from the beginning, because there is that overlap and there are marks, easy marks, low hanging fruit in SBR, which are rooted in the assumed knowledge coming forward. And we shouldn't neglect those, yeah, because they're the marks that we pick up at the beginning. So yeah, SBR is building on the FR.
And I get this question all the time about preparation before the exam. So if we're talking time-wise before an SBR exam, how long are we saying to actually sort of prepare for it, to understand those sort of key foundation knowledge of FR, and then to build up with all the exam practice from your experience? What would you say for a typical student?
Okay, so a lot of students follow a pattern of doing one exam a year, and that's a reasonable thing to do. I think taking two is a bit of you're taking on a lot, and you might fall between two stools. So if you're doing one exam a year, and let's
one a sitting, you mean?
One a sitting, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
One a sitting. So here we are in February, we're coming up to the March exam. So there will be some students who will be looking to finish their skills paper in March, and looking therefore to want to do SBR in June. Now that gives them March, April, and May. Now, you know, you can argue that maybe they should aim for September, but I know students are in a rush, and if they're motivated, a lot of them are going to do that 3-month pattern. Immediately after the exam, enter the next exam and study it for 3 months. Tuition, revision. I think a 2-to-1 split, so that you spend 2 months absorbing the information in.
Yeah.
So that's March and April, and then in May you're revising, you're practicing questions, and you're doing past exam questions. Now that still leaves June. It still leaves a few days in June. What did you do, James, the night before the exam? What did you do 24 hours before the exam?
I'll be honest with you, the 24 hours before the exam, I didn't do a past paper, because I find that lots of students fall into the trap of they'll do a past paper to time the day before, and then they'll turn up to the exam day tired, lethargic, and they're a bit mentally drained from the day before. So the day before, I'm there going and walking and talking myself through all my little notes. If you've got the flip notes, all the key resources, keeping it light, keeping it nice and easy, because as we said, if you've got the foundation, you've already done the groundwork beforehand, it's all about the application and the practice. And the tips that I advocate on my channel are, if you have a blank piece of paper and you start to write down on there everything that you didn't know, and it just builds up and it builds up and it builds up, it's all collated into one area, and you think, oh, day before, quick read, in the morning, quick read. And it's just it's working smarter and not harder for me personally. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, I agree. You know, Muhammad Ali, greatest boxer. What did he do the night before a fight? Was he up late at night, pounding, working hard? No, he was getting a good night's sleep. He was resting. What was he doing in that immediate build-up? He was remembering how hard he had worked. He was building up his confidence. He was thinking about his strategy, right? He wasn't physically working his body hard. Yeah. So I think in those last day or two before the exam, you've got to be kind to yourself. You've got to look and see how far you've come, and know it's a challenge. But you know, when it's tough in the exam for you, it's tough in the exam for everybody else. Suck it up, you know.
It is. Yes. And whilst we're on that point here, for those of the viewers who aren't aware, what is the actual pass rate, give or take, for SBR?
Half. 50%. It hovers sometimes under 47%, 48%. So there's no disgrace in failing this exam. All right. But actually, statistically, I perceive the best time to pass it is your first time. Yeah. And you go into that exam prepared to pass the exam, believing you're going to pass the exam. So it's about having the knowledge, and it's about having the street craft, and you need to learn the technical stuff. That it's difficult in this particular environment to specifically talk to you about defined benefit pension schemes or exchange differences arising on the retranslation of net assets. But there are some technical bits that you need to know in the exam. But there's also in the exam a lot of judgment, a lot of, I'm not going to say creative writing, but your word, application. And the way to prepare for that is by doing past examination questions. And then it's not that you're going to see the same question in the exam. I have lost count of the number of exams that I've seen, whether it's FRE, whether it was AFA, whether it was P2, and now it's SBR. And the ACCA examining team, more than one, not an examiner, it's a team. Those team of people are very creative. You might call them devious. I would say creative. So you, as a student, are going to be faced with an original exam. You're going to be just like at work. You don't know what your boss is going to ask you to do in the morning. You don't know what the client is going to ask you on the phone. And what they don't want is Google, because if they wanted to know the definition word for word, they would just go to Google. But their factory has burnt down. They've got COVID, and it's like, what do I do now?
I completely agree, and it's just sprung in my mind as well. We've got to talk about the online ACCA ethics module as well. So would you recommend, or do you recommend to your students that they complete that before SBR or as early as possible? What's your recommendation on that?
Coming in, so SBR is traditionally the paper that is done at the beginning of professional, strategic professional, because it links up with FR, and you've got that previous knowledge and you don't want to lose it. And the ACCA's recommendation is that you do the ethics and professional skills module as you transition, because there is a step up from skills to strategic professional. So yes, it's a good thing to get under your belt. So I recommend it. It's a good thing to get under your belt. And I'll tell you what, although I say it's a good thing, you've spoken with many SBL lecturers. They don't say it's a good thing. They say it's an essential thing. It's 100% essential for strategic business leader. So it's something to get out there. You can't fail it. It's something to be done, because it's part of that. If you want to be a member, you've got to not only do the exams, not only have the experience, but you've got to prove your ethics, and so it helps. It does help, James. I do recommend it.
The research, ACCA have published research on this, that if students who complete their online ethics before their exams are more likely to pass. So it's one of the first things that you should just do, because you're already on to a winner. It's something that you can control. So definitely get that written down. 100%. Yeah. Get it jotted down in your notes as a to-do. After this video, log into your online My ACCA account and get it done today. Put it as a non-negotiable, as I like to call it, from it.
I think the budget there is something like 15 hours. There's a bit of a fee to pay.
Okay, 2 days, you know, have a sleep in between.
Yeah. So it's you know, you get out what you put in, you know.
Okay, we also touched on in that discussion there, Tom, about if you fail SBR. Okay, so what advice do you give to students that maybe are watching this who have failed SBR before? How would you re-attempt it?
Okay. Take a little bit of time to be angry. Take a little bit of time to be upset. You know, that's okay. Yeah, rant and rave. Ultimately, though, when you've transitioned through that emotional frustration, you've got to reflect. You've got to reflect. You've got to say, it's not that you that failed. It's the exam that wasn't right. And what are you going to do differently next time to ensure that you get a different result? And that means looking internally. What was it? Had you covered the full syllabus? You know, had you done the past exams? Had somebody reviewed those exams? What are you going to do differently? And if you're struggling for motivation, ask yourself, why are you doing this? Why do you want to be ACCA? What's your goal? Is it financial? Nothing wrong with that. Is it fulfilling your potential? Is it career advancement? Why are you doing it? Look to your motivation, and that reason is going to get you motivated, and it's personal to you. And I can't tell you why you as an individual are you know, I mean, I know why I did ACCA.
Why did you do ACCA, Tom? Talk us through it.
Because I left school at 16, because I was a lad and I mucked about, and I'm one of 6, and my dad, love him, hug him, squeeze him, didn't want to pressure us into doing what he did. And so we were brought up in a different age, you know, and so I left school at 16, and that's fine. And then I fell in love when I was 19, 20. And I realized that I'd made a bit of a mistake in not going to university, and I suddenly got a little bit serious about it, and I needed to be that provider. And I hadn't fulfilled my potential. And I genuinely believe that, you know, if you have a skill or you have an aptitude or you've been given something, it's a waste if you don't do it. And I had a brain, and I just was mucking about, and I saw ACCA as an opportunity to fulfill my potential. That's all. So it transformed my life at that time, and that's why one of the reasons I'm very grateful and a passionate advocate of people doing ACCA, because education can transform people's lives.
Lovely. Oh no, thank you for your honesty. But for everyone out there, I mean, just write down, just fulfill your potential, and just pop that up on your wall, and you'll see it every day, and you go, yes, I may have failed it last time, but now I've got a new lease of life. I'm going to go for it as well. And someone told me this, and when I was studying, which I thought was quite interesting, when I failed my first ACCA exam, and I got 43, I think it was, and they said, "Oh, James, you've got 43%. Imagine someone who's just starting. They're starting from naught. They're starting from, you're 43 marks ahead. You've got to find 7. They've got to find 50. Pop it down. I always advocate for actually writing your fail mark up on your wall. You see it every day. And when you come in from work, you've had a long day, you look at it, and sometimes you can go, I'm just going to put on the TV. I'm just going to relax. You see it, and it's just that little nudge, 1% better every day. And then when you get the result, trust me, it'll be worth it. That is it.
Yeah, I mean, 49% is the cruelest mark. 49%. It's terrible, and it causes the most grief. However, when you've been through that, actually, in a way, it's the best mark to fail on. for the
Well,
reasons that you
yes,
just said. Would you
yeah,
rather fail on 49 or would you rather fail on 29? I think I'd rather fail on 49, knowing knowing that I've got a platform on which to build. So it is, I think if you have not done well in the exam, you need to look at yourself, reflect, and work out what you are going to do differently to pass next time. Work a bit harder, work a bit smarter, use additional resources to go over and just repeat the same, looking at the same set of notes or the same videos or the same articles that you did last time is probably going to result in the same result.
exactly.
And if you have failed a paper or you have failed SBR, think of all the exams that you have passed. Because to get to this far, what have you done right? And if you got 45, there's 45 things that you did right. And it's just a question of having another go. It's
Bring yourself back onto it.
Yeah, being positive about it. Yeah, trying
So
to be positive.
if we're going to talk about some of the core areas of SBR,
yeah.
What are we referring to? So that the guys out there can get it jotted down. There is a study guide on ACCA's website. Check it out. But what are we saying for the core areas, Tom, that are a no-brainer for you that you need to be looking at?
We've touched on ethics. All right, that always comes up, and that's an application-based scenario. That's question 2. Question 1 is group accounts. Group accounts. Now, rightly or wrongly, back in the day, what James and I did when we were students, we would have a pen and we would have a paper and we would be writing in the exam, and we would have to prepare a full set of group accounts, and we would try and get that balance sheet to balance, and we would be writing all these numbers out. No more for SBR. What group accounts is asking you to do in SBR is one calculation, and then to describe it. Or actually, wrong way round. I would always, in looking at group accounts, be writing, answering the question. It's about discussing and calculating. So you could have to calculate goodwill, an exchange difference, a disposal, a carrying value. So you're doing a small extract from the accounts. And then at the same time, you're having to give the same number of marks, if not more. What does it mean? Why have you done that? Why have you made a fair value adjustment? Is that a gain in the P&L or is it in OCI? What's going on? So group accounts, that's why you have to understand the principles, and that's why a blind number crunching machine process doesn't get you through anymore. Did you like group accounts, James, when you were studying?
Well, obviously all of mine balanced, Tom. Obviously all of them did. But yeah, I know. It's the process I quite like going through. But we've got group accounts, we've got the ethics, standards on there as well. I mean, we've got the technical articles just to keep up to date with. Anything else?
The standards. I mean, all those standards. And you get everything that you've done at FR, maybe not EPS, maybe not ratio analysis as such, but you've got all those accounting standards, impairment, provisions, even things like PPE and investment property pop up again in SBR. And then they've added a few ones which make my brain hurt. Accounting for derivatives under IFRS 9, pension defined benefit pension schemes, share-based payments. And one of the things that I have to do for myself is to spend a little bit of time explaining to students the background and the commercial transaction. What is a share-based payment? Why are share-based payments issued? What is a defined benefit pension scheme? What is a derivative? Because actually, unless you understand those things first, then you can begin to grasp how we account for them. But unless you understand the nature of a derivative, you kind of don't get what hedge accounting is.
Yes, I completely agree. And it's one of those things that does make a difference when you can demonstrate that core knowledge. And then it links back to application again, saying take the standard And then how does it link into the company where there might be an overstatement of assets or profit, whatever it may be. And for me, that's one of the differences between a pass and a fail in the SBR exam personally.
No, James, you're absolutely right. Because if you just demonstrate the knowledge, it's not enough. It is about that application in a new situation, and sometimes it's critical. It's critical analysis. I mean, this is a a level 7, to use the jargon, exam. So current issues is another one that gets thrown out there as a key area. Now, current issues is sometimes misinterpreted by students. They think a current issue is exclusively about an exposure draft or a new standard. Sometimes it is. But things like environmental reporting, things like accounting standards being out of date and being misapplied are a current issue. So something very old, like ISA 38 on intangible assets. Now, when that standard was written, that was 20 years ago. All right, that was in a previous, I think it was more than 20 years ago. It was written before Amazon. It was written before Uber. It was written before the internet
global giants, yes,
global giant brand names, and so that's an analog standard for a digital age, and it's a current issue that standard isn't really reflecting in our financial statements, the value. My daughter-in-law works for Just Eat. I've got a son who works for Avada, Ocado. Now, they're businesses which are not that profitable at the moment, but their share prices are doing really well. They've built their platforms, they've built their brands. But when you look at their accounts, the brand name is prohibited from being recognized. All that development and research that's gone into building their platforms, a lot of that has been expensed. And so there's a juxtaposition between what the market values those companies at in terms of the share price and the market capitalization with what their financial statements. And if you only look at their financial statements, you would look at Ocado's financial statements. Oh, they're making a loss. They're making a loss. They can't be a very good company. And that's not the case. They're on a verge of a breakthrough of making substantial profits because of their business model. So you get integrated reporting. So the fact that you've got a standard like ISA 38, which is old and failing, is in itself a current issue.
Oh yeah, but then you've got to say to yourself, if you're an SBR student watching this, you've got to ask yourself the question, am I aware of these current issues? Have I had a look at some of the technical articles? Am I competent on the standards? And if you can't answer those questions to me and Tom right now, pop it on the list, go away, check it out. There are bits on Tom's podcast as well, nice little breakdowns on it, give it a listen, well worth your time. But speaking of time, we've got to talk about time management in this exam, because I get this question all the time, okay? First one is, why is time management so key? And then also, what way would you approach the SBR exam? Would you go question 1 first, or would you go for the smaller questions first?
Anyone who's done the exam knows that time management is key. I mean, it is just a given, and that is because you, in preparing for the exam, have absorbed so much information. You know, if you had 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours to do the exam, a well-prepared student would pass. All well-prepared students would pass. Yeah, but you need to be well prepared not only technically, but to get that information out quickly. So time management is key, because the questions take a little bit of time to read and digest, and then you need to reflect. And that's why I'm in danger of repeating myself, but that's why exam practice is so key, isn't it, James? You build up that skill.
Yeah, I'd also say being really strict on the minutes per mark for the marks that you've got to do in that question. And when you hit the time, move on there,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
so many students that I speak with, they spent too long on question one, the bigger question, didn't leave enough time for the later questions where some of those mildly easier marks can be found as well. And that's another reason for me personally why people will fail this exam personally on that. But out of interest, what way would you do the exam? Would you go the smaller questions first or the big one first?
I'll come back to that last question in a minute, but that's
Okay.
why we do mock exams, isn't it? You do mock exams and you fail a mock exam, and that's not a problem. You run out of time doing a mock exam, it's not a problem if you then learn your lesson, so that when you come to do the real exam, you've got that discipline. Because as James was saying, you've got to be strict. If it's 10 marks, in my world, you've got 18 minutes. All right. Now, to get the 7th, 8th, 9th mark out of a 10-mark question, it's like squeezing oranges. All right. You get the first few marks, you get the most of the juice out, the first few twists. All right. And if you keep on flogging that dead horse, it gets harder and harder to get the extra marks. Whereas if you pick up another orange, if you pick up the next question, you've got some easy marks at the beginning. So that's a basic time management technique. Mover. You can leave some space on the paper, or you can, with the computer base, you can just tab a few more. So you can always go back to it later, but you've got to move on. Now, the people that we're talking to are all adults. They're all independent learners. They're all capable of making their own decisions, and they're all capable of reflecting and developing their own examination strategy based on past exam questions. If you choose to do question 1 first, and question 2 second, and question 3 third, and question 4 fourth, fine. But do it as a deliberate choice. Don't do question 1 first because it's called question 1. Choose to do your best question first. Wouldn't it be lovely in that exam after an hour just to take a moment to yourself? Oh, it's going all right so far. Oh yeah, I feel good. I'm not behind. I've got a third of the marks. I reckon I got 35 marks in the bag. Yeah, right. Okay, now we crack on. As opposed to after an hour thinking, sugar.
Yes.
I'm
indeed.
behind. Yeah, I'm running out of time. You're stressed anyway. Do your best question first. And for some people, that will be the ethics question. For some people, it will be the group's question. For some people, it might be a section B question. You decide. Because if you are marking scripts, it's so frustrating, James. You must see this. You must come across this. If they've only attempted 80% of the paper.
Yeah. I know it's hard enough to pass with 100 marks available, let alone I get messages saying, oh, James, I missed some of question C, which was 20 marks. Oh, hang on. If you've missed 20 marks, you need 50 to pass out of 80, not 50 to pass out of 100. So yes, I mean, it's all up to the individual. Come to question practice as you go through. But the key thing that I was used to have when I was a student doing this, what you mentioned about the hour in, hour and a quarter in, get this word jotted down, momentum for it as well. You're just building momentum for yourself. You're an hour in, hour and a quarter in, you've got some marks in the bank. I've built momentum going, yeah, I'm going to have a real good go at this. That's what I used to think about it.
Yeah, it's a bit like trying to score a goal early, having an early goal. You're then in control of the game. You've got a bit of game management going on. England are playing Wales this weekend at rugby. And what we want to see is an early try from the English. And it settles the team down, builds their confidence. They know going forward.
So for final points, Tom, on this, for confidence for the SBR students out there, they've been writing down all these notes as we've been talking through. What couldn't you live with yourself without saying as any final points right now? What have they got to get down that is critical to pass this exam?
There's a lot of information out there. They've got to take advantage of the podcasts, take advantage of the ACCA material, take advantage of good quality study resources so that they put the hard work in and understand the principles of SBR. And then when you've put the hard work in and you've got that, if you like, basic level of fitness, you've got that basic knowledge, then to get involved in doing past examination questions and being familiar with your exam environment. And if that's a CBE exam environment, you know, that means using the ACCA practice platform. I'm sorry that I haven't said anything massively original there, James, but it is about knowing the stuff, knowing exactly, because you want to get 50% to pass. It's not about the ultimate nth minor complication. Don't get me wrong, I do get excited about, and I can explain the, you know, the little issues that are there, but the pass and fail is around time management, knowing the basics, pass examination questions, and being comfortable with it. And if I can help students, then, you know, that's why we're here, isn't it? We're here to help students. So that's great.
Absolutely fantastic, Tom. And I must say, thank you so much for your time today. If you found this video helpful, as I said, all of Tom's details are in the description below. Feel free to leave us a comment down there. If you've got any queries on SBR, myself and Tom will be more than happy to answer it as well. If you have got an upcoming SBR exam, whether that's the March 2021 paper or going into whatever year you're watching this video, who knows, Tom? But, you know, we'll still be wearing funkier shirts next time we do another video of these. But again, thank you so much for your time, Tom. Really appreciate it. And again, if you found this video helpful, feel free to give it a like or share to another student who you know is doing SBR, because these tips will definitely help. Go on, Tom.
Can I say one last thing?
Of course you can.
Share with another student. James, when I studied as a student, I had a mate, and I now realize how useful it was to have a study buddy, to have a mate, because we talk about absorbing all the information in, but in the exam, you've got to get it out. So if, you know, like you and I have been talking about education, you and I have been talking about ACCA, we enjoy that. As a student, if you can get together with another student, then just talking through, because you're explaining to somebody else what the issues are, and that's what you've got to do in the exam.
Fantastic, fantastic stuff. Well, as I said, everyone, all the details down below. Thank you so much for watching. Best of luck. I mean, give it your all. Don't leave that exam early as well. I mean, that's just, you can't do that at all. I mean, we'll fall out. But yes, I know, as I said, all the details below. Hope you've enjoyed the video as well. But as always, on that bombshell, we'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom.